So I thought this time what I'd do is take you through the next step in my video production process, which is editing. You might say, well, why do I care? Well, you don't need me to tell you that video is pretty ubiquitous, and for me these days, video editing is much like word processing was 20 years ago. So it's something I think people need to be kind of aware of what goes on. We all need videos. If you're not making it yourself, you might be commissioning somebody like me to make it, and it's probably useful just to know a little bit about what happens and some of the terminology. So today what I'm going to do, I'll just go to another camera. So I'm going to be showing you this software over here, which is Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, all video editing programs, they're called non-linear editors, and they all operate in a similar sort of manner. And the reason they're called non-linear editors is because when you make a cut, you don't actually cut the raw footage. So for this project, let me see, I have a whole bunch of assets that I've imported when I've come home with the camera, and other assets for the project, and they stay here. So this is all the footage that never changes. When I make changes like color corrections, it has links back to that footage. It doesn't actually change it in any way. So the project I'm going to show you today, this was a job for Hume City Council I filmed about 2 weeks ago. It's about some money they spent on redeveloping a reserve. And to give you an idea, this took about 4.5 hours to film, so that's including 2 hours driving there and back to Sunbury, and about 5 hours to edit. So, you know, it's a budget of about $1,200 that the council paid, and it's about a 90-second video. So what I'll do is I'll just dive into the software now and show you show you around the screen and how editing happens, how it comes together. So that's the screen that you're looking at. Now, in this bottom right corner, hold on, I can just put me in the top right. Yep. Hopefully you can see that. So in this bottom left-hand corner, if I make that full screen, what this has got, this is called the media pool, where you saw I had the assets in Windows Explorer, and I dragged those assets, all the footage, all the graphics, into the media pool, and the program ingests them. It sort of recognizes them, but doesn't make a copy or change them, as I say. So what I've got here, you'll see there's folders. There's a folder of, where is it? A-roll here. If I double open that, that's got all my interviews, and I can scrub through them here. I can kind of just quickly play them and get a feel for what's there. I've got another folder with B-roll. Now, B-roll is the stuff that goes over the top of the interviews, and it's actually the pretty stuff that actually really tells the story. Is really important. B-roll makes it sound like it's secondary. It's certainly not. The colours are a bit muted here, and the reason is I filmed in a flat colour profile, and what that means, the camera records it with less colour in initially, so it has a greater dynamic range, so that when you come back and edit, you can stretch it out, and you can make the whites whiter and the darks darker, and you've got a better chance of getting a bright sky and a dark shadowy area all in the one frame. So that's why they look a bit grey or a bit black and white. And then I've got a folder with all the graphics, and to give you an idea. So what happens is, with any of these assets down here, I can double click them and they open in this source monitor, which is in the top left. And this is where the editing starts to start. So I'll just play this back. This is something I made in another program called After Effects. And it's just a little outro. So that's the outro. If I go to, let's say, a bit of B-roll, okay, I'll clear these in and out points. I'll just show you how the editing starts to happen. So I'll clear the in and out. So I might play it a little bit and I can see, here's a good bit. I just want to set an in point there, so I'll click I for in, and I'll move it along, and I'll click 0 for out, and I've now clipped that bit of that scene. And if I go to the timeline, and this is the next window I'll show you, I could put the playhead here, and then if I hit the full stop, it'll put that little bit of footage on my timeline, and it's now playing over here. This monitor in the top right is, if you like, the outcome of what's in the timeline. But I'll take that off there. So the first step in my editing process is I will go through those interviews that I showed you before. So if I go back to bin A, there's Drew. He was one of the guys that both uses the park, and he's got kids that use this park, and he helped build it. So he was quite interesting. So
I'm a contractor for Hume.
I'll just play a little bit. I'm hoping you can hear that. I can't.
This project was
so he was quite nervous,
especially at the end of the day. All the community coming and
I'll
asking
turn him
a lot
up
of
a bit.
questions, and they wanted to know what elements we're putting in and just all that kind of stuff.
So I go through and clip the best bits.
My favourite part of the
phrases that I think I'm going to use, and
the Hume City Council and State Government have invested over $4 million
different interviews
for our local precinct here. The new estate's being built behind us. It's vitally important for families and to come down and enjoy the rest of the park and the actual place we do have here.
And then you'll see I'll leave a gap.
So I brought my kids down here on opening.
And then there's the next bit that I've clipped. So I leave the gaps because I think, well, that's quite a major change in topic from here to here. So I know I'm probably going to want to space that out a bit so that it makes sense in the final video. So I let the video breathe, as it's called, and the B-roll over the top will help sort of tie those two bits together. And the other thing I'm doing in this rough cut, in this timeline here, is ordering it so that the story starts to make sense. So obviously what somebody says at the end isn't necessarily left at the end. I might use it at the beginning. In fact, this comment that this guy says at the beginning about the 4.1 million that council spent on the project, he did say that at the end.
To see the Hume City Council and State Government have invested over $4 million.
So basically, I'll make sure it's got an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And so my next step after having done this rough cut is I'll just click over to this timeline, and this is where I start to build it out, literally build it on this timeline. Now what you can see here, the brown tracks, all the video is above this center line, and all the audio is below the center line. And with the brown or beige tracks, that's my A-roll, that's the interview. So if I run the playhead along, you'll see I first got an introductory title, and then it's got some drone shots that I took of the reserve, and then it comes back to Glenn, who's the first interviewee, the president of the local football club.
To come down and enjoy the precinct.
Okay, and then so on it goes, and after the A-roll, the thing I'll often do is put the music on, and I'll try and time some of these gaps and some of the interviews with the beat of the music, or at least where the music rises, and it gives it it has an amazing effect, and which people don't notice in terms of the pace and rhythm of the video if you can time some of the cuts to the music. Now obviously that's a lot easier to do when you don't actually have dialogue or an A-roll interview that you're trying to fit things in with. So often I won't do too much fitting to the music when I've got interviews, but if there's no interviews, I'll almost totally make it fit to the beat of the music. So you can see these keyframes where in the gaps the music rises and then drops down.
Place that we do have here.
I go through and keyframe it.
So I brought my kids down here on opening. They absolutely love.
So in terms of building it up, the next thing I'll do after putting the music on is I'll add the B-roll, and that's this turquoise track here. So that's all the B-roll, and you can see me scrubbing through it here. So there's the interview, and then there's a little kiddie on his bike on the new run there, and somebody on the Flying Fox. So that's the B-roll. And as I say, obviously I'm building that up. What I'm looking for obviously is attractive shots. Sometimes I'm covering up glitches in the A roll with it, literally covering it up. And obviously I'm covering up some of these cuts. So if I turn this layer off, you can see here I've got a cut.
We've also had new social rooms. We've also had...
See, and it creates a jump cut. So I'm covering up those jump cuts with the B-roll. And then on this next layer, it's an adjustment layer. That's where I've got the color correction. I'll just show you the color correction panel. So that's where I'm bringing my the flat footage back to what's called Rec 709, which is a broadcast color standard. What I'm doing is, you can see I've put a curve in the waveform of the colors. So if I turn off the adjustment layer, you'll see how it goes a little bit more flat. And I'm looking at these scopes to see how stretched out it is in the IRE between 0 and 100. So the more you stretch it out, so if you have a watch here, if I pull this curve out, you can see I can go really extreme, or I can make it darker. So I've got a lot of control with the colors. And then the last track at the top is just the council's logo down here. So that's it. That's really my approximate video editing process. Of course, the last step is I'll add all those graphics and titles, like these lower thirds that I'll build in After Effects. So just to show you how
for families
they work.
To come down and
There's
enjoy
a bit
the
of
precinct in the area,
animation
especially
or
with the
motion
park and the
graphics
actual...
involved in that. Titles. Oh, the last step is obviously rendering it out. So this is, as I say, this non-linear editing program has created links back to the main footage. So what you see in this timeline is a bunch of links, essentially. If I hit Control M, it brings up the window that allows me to render this out. So my last step is to what the program does is pulls all those components together and kind of compresses them together and creates an MP4 file. That's the product that I'm selling you. That's what you finally get from me. I won't do that now. It takes a little while. If you've got a lot of animation, or if you've got a lot of effects and many hours worth of video, rendering out can take literally hours. It does take a long time. So it's not like, when I said before, it's like word processing. It's not, in that you can't easily go back and change something. You've then got to go through that whole render. Like, it might only take me a second to make a change in the timeline, but then I might have 10 or 20 minutes of rendering out to do and uploading. So after I've rendered it out, I will, let me just see, where can I show you? I'll upload it to this service, which is a little program called Screenlight, and my client can play the video.
Loved it. I could not get them to leave.
And she can leave comments. As you can see, she's left comments on the right-hand side here. And it might be swap this picture out, or change this, or bring that forward. In this one, we had quite a few changes to make. Actually, it's not too many. You can see on the left, that's pretty normal. There was a one-day turnaround for this, which is always good, because it just means people haven't got too much of an opportunity to keep going backwards and forwards over it. So when she makes a comment, it actually leaves a little pin in the timeline where for where that comment is relevant to. So she makes the comment when it's played at the right time on the timeline in here, and it allows me to see exactly where she's talking about, and that makes it much easier than trying to exchange emails. So that's my video editing process. I hope that was of some use. You've got an idea what a non-linear editing program is and how it's non-destructive. Essentially, my skill is not so much driving the software. Obviously, I'm quick with it, and that's part of it. But it's really bringing all the parts together. It's cutting the interview so that it makes sense, understanding exactly what it is the client's trying to achieve, and telling that story in 90 seconds, which is actually not a very long period of time, often for the volume of material that people want to get across. The other skill, of course, is actually getting a half-decent performance when you're filming and making people look warm and expert. So look, that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions, I guess?
Thank you, Keith. That was very good, and I've used you and recommended you to a number of clients, so I know they're all pretty happy with your services. So thank you for that. So, are there any questions from members or guests?